Is that any better? It sounds better. Great. Thank you. Golly, you've all been so patient and so well behaved. 1 hour to go. I'll try and make this afternoon's session a bit dynamic. I hope you'll learn some new things. I've certainly learnt some new stuff today, including some new Swedish words, including Microsoft, save as Daisy, social DRM. So those are the words I'm taking home with me in my new expanded Swedish vocabulary. I've also learnt hey, so hey. And I hope an ebook, I think, will probably be quite helpful for today. So I'm going to talk to you today about the ebook situation in the UK. Much of it applies to the US as well. I realise the situation is quite different in Sweden, and you all know a lot more about the ebook situation in Sweden than I do, because I saw lots of pretty pictures, but I didn't get so much of that presentation. So I'm just hoping that I'm not going to say anything that makes me look silly. So in this presentation then, and I've got quite a few gadgets and things to hopefully demonstrate to you, but that's a minefield for any presenter, but there's quite a lot of material to get through. I'm going to talk really around, first of all, why even work for accessible mainstream ebooks. I'm going to talk about the state of the ebook market in the UK. I think you just heard about it in Sweden. I'm going to talk about the role that ebooks and accessible ebooks have for people with print disabilities. What do they bring? I'm then going to consider how many accessible ebooks are out there today in 2013 and what has the journey been. And then some ideas for you, some next steps, and maybe some things for you to take away and to play with over the weekend. And then lastly, this presentation will be available online, I believe, and so lots of the statistics, numbers and references to reports that I give, they follow the final slide, so if you get hold of a copy of the presentation, you can click through and follow to those links. This, of course, is a celebration of the 10th anniversary, the 10th birthday of the Swedish DAISY Consortium, and congratulations, of course, for all your hard work and for your achievements. I'm going to go back a little further in time to 1868, and I want you to imagine a smart London house near Hyde Park, where a gentleman has 4 friends round for dinner to talk about an issue that they're all concerned about. This person is Thomas Rhodes Armitage, and he was a doctor of medicine, but had retired because of his failing sight. And his 4 friends round to lunch that day were blind. And the issue they were all concerned with is a familiar one to everyone in this room. It was about how can we get more literature to people with sight loss. That was the issue that concerned them. The organisation that they established in order to start to address this book famine became what is now the Royal National Institute of Blind People, RNIB, the organisation for whom I worked for some 23 years. And over the many years of that organisation's work, they have turned out thousands of pages of Braille, hours and hours, of course, of talking books, and many, many books in large print. But here we come to the availability of accessible titles, and even though RNIB is producing up to 2,000 titles each year, that doesn't really compare to the UK publishing industry, which is a mammoth endeavour. The UK publishing industry, according to the latest figures I found, produce more than 150,000 books each year. And if you've read the reports that form part of the whole movement behind the Marrakesh Treaty, we know that some less than 7% ever make their way into large print, audio, or Braille. And for Braille, that number is so much less. And so, Daisy's dream of accessible mainstream publishing, which you probably heard of earlier in the day in Swedish, which is the vision of using Daisy as a vehicle to really advocate for the best way to read and the best way to publish with a mission of achieving the same book at the same time and the same price. So that is where we are all heading. Well then, where are ebooks in the UK and what contribution might they make? Well, where we are in the UK now, after a few years of ebooks being on the market and being accepted by consumers, here are some facts for you. So nearly 90, I can probably walk across here and save my neck if I can look at this thing. So nearly 99% of adult fiction titles published last year were available as an ebook. I don't know how that compares to what you just heard in Sweden. Does anyone want to enlighten me? How many percentage of the books that were published in Sweden were available as ebooks? Was it anything like that?
We publish all books that are older than 9 years old. For the target group, for over 9 years old, we publish all Swedish books, 100%. But if we go back in time, it's not like that. It's 40%.
Okay, so a similar story in the older books wouldn't be like. So in 2012, 99% of adult fiction. Now notice I'm being careful with the words there, adult fiction. That's not all books. Many books aren't finding their way as ebooks, cookery books, those sorts of things that are more graphical in their layout. 34% of the total books that published in 2012 were actually ebooks, which compares to 24% the previous year. These are industry figures. In terms of the purchasing, in 2012, 1 in 5 adult fiction books were bought as ebooks. So people are buying these things. There's actually a high consumer acceptance of them, and when people are making a choice between print books or ebooks, or print books and ebooks, they are buying ebooks. In March of 2013, 24% of British adults downloaded an ebook. And in terms of the range of titles that are available, or rather the volume, Amazon, I heard a few references to Amazon, I'm sure it was all good. Amazon claimed to have 2.2 million ebook titles for the Kindle. Kobo claim over 3 million ebooks for sale. And there are hundreds of thousands of free books as well. So that's a kind of a quick state of how things are in the UK, how many books there are, and whether people are buying them or not. And how are people reading ebooks? Well, on an e-reader, I have one with me here. This is one from Nook. So other brands other than Amazon do exist. These are £29 in the UK, available from kind of high street stores, the kind of catalogue shops and so on. I've got this one set up for large print. It works really well, really nicely as a large print reader, and you can sideload content to it as well. And then you move across. This is a touchscreen one, so you swipe through. So £29 gets you an e-reader, but most people are reporting that they're choosing to read ebooks on a smartphone or a tablet, like the iPad or like Amazon Android devices. And in terms of academic studies, people, of course, continue to use a computer, logging on to their university library, and then they're using those more for annotating. It's less a passive reading experience, much more of an annotating, cut and pasting, and those sorts of things. So here are some of those examples. The Nook, the Kindle Fire, the Nexus 7, which runs Android, and the iPad Mini. And when I travel on the train, I see so many people are sitting and reading books with these devices. Is that the case in Sweden? Or not so much. I'm seeing a few shakes of the head. I mean, lots of people are reading this way now in the UK. So then, to the main event, which is really around the benefits of accessible ebooks to people with print disabilities. And in summary, and I'm going to demonstrate some of these features to you, and I'm hoping that I'm not showing you stuff that you all know just very well, and I'm just going to plow on anyway, because if you all say you know that, then my talk becomes very short. But there is the ability to change the colours and the fonts of the text that you're reading, to increase the size of text and pictures, The book can read to you with either a synthetic voice or, if it's built in, a human narrated voice. You can read the text with a braille display, control the book with switches, which I'll come to, and if time works and I'm feeling confident, I'll show you how we can read a book using our ears and my mouth and a piece of tubing that I've stolen from my son's fish tank. And all really deliver for our consumers the same book at the same time, at the same price, that DAISY vision. So to changing the colours and the fonts. So this is, of course, helpful for people who are dyslexic or who have other specific learning disabilities or who have sight problems. I'm sure the sort of stuff that's familiar to you already with the e-text services that might be available in Sweden. So I can do a live demo of this, but I'm going to attempt to run my first movie here. And I'm going to show you this on the iPad app from the company called Nook. So that was part of Barnes & Noble, an American company. And the reason I'm showing you this one, because in my experience, this is the one that gives the best control over the ability to change the colours, the font, the line spacing, and so on. And I've done a screen capture of this happening, so I'll just talk through that happening now. So, if I could play the video, fingers crossed. So here's a screenshot of my iPad. I've just unlocked it, and I'm going to start the Nook app. Up it starts with the library. If one needed to, you could use the zoom feature to navigate around the library. And it starts with a book in a kind of fairly standard mode. So the first thing I do is increase the size of the text. That's popped up quite nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is choose a different font. So I've chosen a sans serif font there. Next, I'm going to, I don't know, what am I going to do next? I've increased the line spacing. So some people, where they find that the words all blend into each other, increasing the line spacing happens. And now I've changed the color theme to yellow print on a blue background. There's also the possibility of changing the margins as well to get more text on the screen. So this is a commercial product. It's commercial content. There are hundreds of thousands, if not million books available on this platform, instantly customizable by the individual to their own requirements. And then if their eyesight changes during the day or they're reading content that they want a different experience, they're able to change that on the fly, and in this case, change and choose different themes. So useful in those respects. Next then, increasing the size of the text and pictures, which of course is useful to people or for people who are dyslexic or have other specific learning disabilities or who have sight problems. I have a screenshot of an e-reader, and you saw me demonstrate one earlier where I'd increased the size of the font there. I remember being in the biggest bookshop I've ever been in. It was a Barnes & Noble, actually, in Baltimore in the US. This thing, I think, is a converted brewery or something, and they've taken out the middle of this building, and you can stand in the middle of the building and you can look up and you see floors and floors and floors of books on shelves, all for sale. And then there was one bookshelf I could see. I was standing next to it. I tried to get a photograph. I couldn't make it work, which was large print. So someone who wanted large print had the experience of going into a bookstore and seeing what a tiny proportion of what was available for them in their preferred reading format. Well, with an e-reader, with a device or with an app that allows them to customize it the way they want to, all of the bookshop is available to them. So here's a video. I mean, I'm talking, and I'm talking on behalf of others. Let's get some people talking here. So I'm going to run a video of Val, and Val uses her iPad to read, and Val is partially sighted. Sound. So I'm afraid there might be some scratching noises, so because I'm going to switch the sound here and then restart the video. Sorry, I don't know how to... Okay, last time.
Actors. You can adapt.
Here we go. Sorry, Val. Right, here we go. Here's Val. You're on.
My name is Val Brown. I'm age 66. I'm partially sighted and I'm retired. The most helpful thing on the iPad for me is the magnification tool. It zooms on the letters. You can adapt the size of text to what you need. I started using the iPad about a year ago. First thing I ever did, I went to bed and read a book. I just enjoyed flicking the pages like I would if I was reading a normal book. I would be totally lost without it.
So there's Val, an older lady who maybe before she got her iPad would think that using a device like that really wasn't for her. But there you saw her. She was reading not just books, but her daily newspaper using it, and really simple gestures of pinch to zoom, for example, to increase the size of the text. So, I mean, it's a technology. There's lots of complex technology in that device, but to her, it's her magic thing that means that reading is a possibility for her of the things that she wants to read. Okay, so in this little tour then of the different things that ebooks and accessible ebooks can bring, let's move to the book can read to you. So when I started this journey of accessible ebooks, there were plenty of books on the market, but none of them were compatible with the screen reading technologies of the time. I think I heard some amazing news that for Sweden, typically people or publishers are choosing to use social DRM, which means that people then take responsibility, of course, for managing the content that they legitimately own, but it doesn't lock them into using a specific reader. Well, that's not the case in the UK and the US. These titles are very firmly locked down into the readers that provider chooses for you and insists that you use. And so if that isn't accessible to your screen reading technology, then that's the end of the story. You can't choose a different one. Unfortunately, over the last, 18 months really, we've seen some real progress of improved accessibility of these reading tools. Here we see Josh, who I know, he's an American chap, reading a book on his iPhone. And I have a number of devices. I said I'd have them here. So the first I have is a Kindle. So this is from Amazon, I'm afraid. So this is a Kindle Fire. There are a few of these, and they have just released this model in the UK, and this now has full screen reading ability to be able to purchase a book, to navigate your library, to open a book that you have downloaded, to have it continuously reading with the text-to-speech, and then to stop the text-to-speech, and to navigate by line, word by word, letter by letter, and have that read to you. The kinds of things that people are used to if they're using a screen reader to read electronic text. That comes now built into a device like this. This is the Kindle Fire HDX, I believe, and it also works on the HD. Now, because it's kind of hard to demonstrate a 7-inch device to an audience of people, some of whom are sitting 30 feet away, 10 meters, then I am available for the rest of this afternoon, and I'll be around with these devices tomorrow. So stop me if you want to have a play with one of these things. But what I will also show, just so there's other stuff than solely the Kindle range, this is a Nexus 7. So this is from, it's from Asus, I think, who make this. Yeah. So lots of different Android tablets available. The reason I choose to go with the Nexus brand of devices is that these always get the very latest version of Android. And with each edition of Android, they improve the accessibility. They improve how it works with the zoom feature, with the screen reader, which they call TalkBack, and with the Braille display support, which they call BrailleBack. So on this device, here's another option that isn't tied to Amazon. But frankly, the best option really right now if you can afford it, is something like the iPad or the iPhone. So I'm going to have a go at demonstrating this. Fingers crossed. I think I've lost a cable. Can I get a sense of whether or not do you know all about using something like VoiceOver with ebooks, or is this helpful to learn about? Some nods. Okay, great. Even at this stage in the day. Super. So, too many leads. I'm looking for the HDMI. Great. Ooh. Thank you. I'll put my pin in before I project the screen. And here we go. So, here's my iPad. I'm going to be brave and I'm going to go into, well, first of all, I'm going to start VoiceOver. Now, because of the way I've got this set up, I'm going to have to rely on using this microphone to pick it up. So let's see if this works. So,
iBooks.
Oh, crumbs, that works.
Double tap to open.
Okay, so here we go.
Kindle.
So for those not familiar
Double tap to open.
with using VoiceOver, it comes built into iPhone, iPod, and all the different iPads. It's free. It speaks lots of different languages. It's speaking English right now. And I'm swiping across to move between the icons, and I'm going to go into the Kindle app, which is the app for reading books from Amazon's ebook store.
Kindle. Double tap to open. Menu off. Double tap for menu.
Oh, look,
Swipe 2 fingers down for continuous reading. Double tap and hold to select text.
Okay, so just to prove a point, I've got some Swedish text here. This is a Swedish ebook. Do you know I couldn't find very many Swedish ebooks on the stores I went to. Maybe they're all on different stores. But in the top 100 books on the Kindle store, it only went as far as 49. So I thought that could have told me something. So in order to get it to start reading, I can just navigate into it and then swipe down with 2 fingers and it'll start the reading.
Off at floor font.
Okay, so that's reading with an English voice, of course. Hang on.
Characters, words, lines, containers. Headings, language, default language.
Svenska.
Better?
Han har testat flera gånger tidigare. Han har testat flera gånger tidigare. Och det har alltid fungerat. Ofattbart släpphänt säkerhet med personliga uppgifter. Barnen i huset är vuxna och sällan på besök. För säkerhets skull har Lars dubbelkollat barnens Facebook-status.
Okay, and then if I wanted to, I could do those things of now changing it so it's not continuous reading, but to spell out individual words, for example.
Headings, containers, lines, words.
Dubbelkollat barnens Facebook. Dubbelkollat. Offret borde vara ensamt. Offret borde vara ensamt.
Lines, words, characters.
Spase. L-A-R-S. Spase.
I like to incorporate a few laughs, but I have no idea what I did there. Okay, so this is work that's been done by the Amazon Kindle team, but they're taking advantage of all the work that's been done by Apple on their iPad system. So, do you know, that may not be a very exciting demo. To me, it is, because what this represents is access to accessible books using the mainstream mechanism. And when Kindle introduced their accessible app, I think it was a generational step change, where suddenly something like 2 million books became available to someone where previously I had to wait for accessible titles to be made available to them. And the best way I can use to illustrate this kind of story is from a friend of mine who is blind, who told me soon after this happened that he was listening to a book review program on the radio. And before they'd finished talking about the book, he was reading the book himself. And he said he'd never had that experience in his entire life. That was just transformational for him. So if I unplug this, we should get my presentation back. I'm sorry if this microphone's going a bit on and off. I'll try and be consistent with where I'm speaking. Is it okay? Okay. So the book can read to you. I've given you one way that the book can read. There are many different sorts of implementation, I suppose. The way it's done under Android is different. And coming, I hope, any day now, and I won't make no apologies, another Amazon innovation is something that they call immersive reading, which is available in the US, and I've tried to get it so it was available for a demonstration for you today, and I pretended to be in America when I was in India, and my machine got very, very confused. What this does is it takes, again, something possibly familiar to you folk already, it takes a Kindle title, which is the text, and it takes an Audible title, which is a professionally narrated audiobook, and it joins them together, so as you read, it highlights the sentence that's being read. So when you buy your Kindle edition, you pay another $1.82, and it suddenly becomes a narrated Kindle title where you're not using the text-to-speech, although it's an option for you, you're using the human narrated version as well. So we wait for that to become available in countries other than the US. So the book can read to you. My son has dyslexia, he struggles with his reading, he finds reading a chore, I try and encourage him to read. This is another technique that he has. So he reads print books, of course, he listens to audiobooks, but he also has some of the more basic text-to-speech happening as well, just another way for him to read. Different modes, different choices, different titles, and the mood that he is in. And then lastly, reading the text with Braille. All of those things that I just showed you with the screen reader, whether you're using TalkBack with BrailleBack or using the iPad with its built-in screen reading system, VoiceOver, it's possible to connect a Braille display if you're lucky enough to have one, and you can read your book in Braille as well, or read your book in Braille without listening to the voice. Especially powerful, of course, for someone who is deaf-blind. We all have those formative moments, don't we, in our lives? And I remember distinctly meeting a young man, and I was privileged to be the first person to introduce this young man who was deaf-blind to using the internet with a Braille display. And just, we have an expression in English of, being like in a sweet shop. He was like a boy in a sweet shop, because all of a sudden, whereas previously all of his information was mediated for him by his carers and by the services that were able to produce only a small amount of information, he was able to get access to content which he could choose and have control over. And again, that experience that I told you about of my friend reading the book when he'd listened to a book review, for someone to have access to 2 million titles with Braille is truly a generational change. So helpful for people who are blind, helpful for people who are deaf-blind, and for those who choose to read with Braille and speech together, particularly younger ones maybe who are learning the spellings of words, and that's an important element for them. So I've met a friend of mine who is also another friend who's blind. I've been in this business for a long time. I know lots of blind people. He was at a railway station waiting for a train. He only had this on his lap. His phone was in his bag or in his pocket or something, and that was what he was reading with. So I'm holding up a small 24, I think, Braille display that connects to the device with Bluetooth, and there are buttons on here to control the reading, to go back and forth and all those sorts of things. And that's what he was reading his book with. So okay, so I've told you some stories, I've done a bad demonstration, I've shown you a short video. Let's hear from some people, real people, who are talking about how they're using ebooks. And hopefully the audio and everything will work. So we're going to hear from Jerry, Scott and Thierry.
Library, button. Table of contents, button.
I would use this for accessing email, the internet, and also it has the ability to read e-books. The role of the e-book in opening up the world for visually impaired and blind people is really important. It can keep you current with the information in the world that's happening, and so there's a feeling of inclusion when you use an e-book.
My favourite way, if it's going to be kind of an extended period of reading and I'm going to sit there for an hour or two and really get into a book, is to use a braille display. There are kind of units that are like that big, down to units that you can fit in the palm of your hand, basically.
A lot of blind and visually impaired children don't realise sometimes that they can read just like other people, and it's something that everyone should be able to do.
It's all I've ever wanted, is that she could just do what all the other kids do, and the ebook reader has more or less allowed her to do that.
It's given me my job, really. If the existence of the ebook, the electronic text, if that wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to do independently what I do for a living now.
Okay, so some real people talking about how they're using ebooks. And at the end there, I think the most compelling message from Jerry, who is saying that the way that he continues to stay in work, earn a living, pay his bills, is because he's able to access information and stay competitive in the field of work that he's in. I've spent most of my career working in the field of sight loss, but we all know that the range of print disabilities goes much wider. In the UK, the Copyright Act actually speaks to people with sight loss, but also to those with physical disabilities, which mean they're unable to hold a book or turn the pages. And for years, we had approaches to us at RNIB when I was working there, from people saying, are there switch accessible DAISY players? How can you make your service accessible to those with severe physical disabilities? Well, here's one option. I did some phone calls recently to some accessibility firms. Here's one option. This is an electric page turner, which one places a kind of traditional print book into, and it turns the pages, and you control it using whatever switch works for you and your abilities. So I'm going to run a short video of this now.
With the flip automatic page turner, moving through the pages of a book or magazine is as simple as the push of a button or a switch. Press a switch once to turn one page, or hold it down to turn a continuous string of 5 pages in a row. What makes the flip so exciting is that it works.
Okay, so it's exciting because it works. I'm really not poking fun at that. That was clearly a solution for people and applied to what the issues were at the time and what the possibilities were at the time. So what we saw was a device into which a book was placed, and we may have heard some electric whirrings as something a bit like a windscreen wiper came across and turned the pages, and it was controlled by using switches. Well, the companies I spoke to said that they used to sell these products for, well, thousands of pounds because they were sold in low volume and there wasn't that much call. But for someone who wanted to independently read, that was a solution. So what do mainstream ebooks bring for that? And I promised you a demonstration with a bit of rubber tubing, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do now. So back to the iPad. Okay, I think I may be taking this a step too far. So rather than stand up here and mess around, I think I've got too many connections and things, and I could be here for 2 minutes fiddling and I'll lose your what is your good attention. So if anyone wants to see it, I'd be very, very happy to demonstrate. But basically what I have is a switch interface which goes through to a little pressure switch that I got from an electronics store. And then I stole this tubing from my son's aquarium, and the demonstration basically has a square moving around, and with it I can, by blowing into the switch, choose to start an app. I can then control the app. How the demonstration would have gone is I would have asked you to choose one of the books from the titles, and I would then gone through and started it playing, changed the reading speed, skip chapters and so on, all by blowing through a hose, and all using mainstream technologies there.
How much is that price?
The switch interfaces are about £50. And again, I say it's mainstream. It's actually, sorry, the question was how much is the device? The device is actually designed for a musician to use with a foot pedal to switch over the music, and it works with the switch interface as well. So they're £50 Bluetooth devices. Okay, so great for people with physical disabilities as well. And my belief is that these things will only improve, become easier to use, and hopefully the price will come down. So great. I've told you about the book famine, and I've told you about the benefits that accessible mainstream ebooks can bring. Well, just how many are out there already? Have we had this slide already? It looks familiar. So Apple iBooks, 1.8 million books and counting. Amazon have more than 2.3 million ebooks for the Kindle. Kobo, do we know of Kobo? They're in 200-something countries, but I couldn't find Swedish as a language. They're originally a Canadian company, now owned by a big Japanese publishing conglomerate. They have 3 million ebooks for sale. And there are hundreds of thousands of free ebooks too that are out of copyright, or where the rights holder has released them under Creative Commons or something like that. But of course, well, I say here in English mainly, and that's true of those numbers. But I think you heard that things are improving. Lots of graphs with lines going in the right direction earlier. So I took that as good news. Oh, here's one of those graphs. So when you have those big numbers, you have no sense of what does that mean to an individual. So when I was at RNIB, we initiated a series of annual surveys. And what we did is we looked at the top 1,000 books that were sold according to the book industry figures. We divided them up a bit, so we looked at adult fiction, adult non-fiction, and children's titles. But these were based on the most popular titles of that year. And when we did the survey in 2012, of course, we were looking at the figures from 2011. So we were always kind of a year behind, as it were. But we wanted to understand the trend. And of course, one would assume that the numbers would be better. One would assume the numbers would be better for the front list, for the big sellers, and that probably the proportion of accessible ebooks would fall away for less popular titles. I don't know really whether that's true, but that was a kind of an assumption. And we started with zero because, as I said, when we first started this work, there weren't any ebook platforms and ebooks available on them that met our definition of what accessibility meant, which was that someone would be able to choose a book, to purchase it and download it, to navigate their library of content, to open a book, and then to read through the book and be able to navigate in a granular fashion, so line by line, word by word, letter by letter. So it wasn't the highest bar, but it wasn't as simple as, could someone else start the book reading for you and it would simply read. We wanted to introduce a level, of course, of independence and personal choice in there. So, when the numbers go up, there is a factor of both more ebooks being available, but also more ebook platforms becoming accessible. So in 2009, the percentage was 0%. A big jump in 2010 when Adobe made some progress with their platform, really mainly on the PC, their product called Digital Editions. Not used that so much, actually, in the UK, but books were available if someone wanted to read them on a PC. And then with the release of iBooks and more books becoming available in 2011, the number went right up to 73%. I mean, wow. And then in 2012, 84% of books that were measured in that top 1,000 were available to that definition of accessibility. This was a level of output, when people talked about it in terms of being the equivalent of hundreds of years of RNIB churning out books by enabling the mainstream to do this stuff. So there's a table of the figures and a graph that illustrates that increase. Were we to look at 2013, I don't think we would have any reason to think that that number wouldn't continue to rise up and up. And it's been in that year that the Kindle platform has become accessible with not only large print, but also now with speech and with Braille, and that will increase the number significantly too. So, some highlights were that in terms of adult fiction, 99% of the titles were accessible. For non-fiction, 77%. So the assumptions, and we dug around this a little bit, were that the number was lower for non-fiction because of that blend of more complex materials and titles where the publisher chose not to release it as an ebook. Or maybe they didn't release it as an ebook because they were intending to release it as an app. So the two things would be different. So it could be maybe that a cookery book by a famous chef would become a cookery app with video in it and maybe the option to purchase things and do things with a website and all those sorts of things. Maybe that would never be released as an ebook on one of these platforms. And children's titles was lower. And our assumption there was that, maybe the industry was assuming that maybe children weren't so likely to be ebook purchasers, and their main thrust was in the adult fiction area. It may be also that in terms of the range of titles that would be in that category, quite a few of them would be for younger readers, and very much a blend of lots of images and pictures and very few words in the category of where children are learning to read, for example. If we have time, I can show you some of the things where I think that are challenging. So those are some highlights for you. And some caveats too, some further caveats. I'm going to walk over here again so I get to stretch my legs. So audio formats we know are not the same. And so when we said that something was accessible because it would be read with one's ears using text-to-speech, that isn't everyone's choice, as we know. Some people prefer to read with text-to-speech, but many people prefer to read with narrated, with a person narrating it, because it's more of a leisure experience. So this offers a choice. This offers something in addition to what so many organisations are working hard on. But to say that because something is accessible with a screen reader doesn't mean it meets everyone's needs. So an obvious caveat, I hope. Another one, I think, is that this benefits people who have the resources and the skills to use this technology. Not everyone has the money to go out and buy an expensive tablet or to buy an iPhone. Those that do, a whole new world opens up to them. But many people are not working or are pensioners, or they may not have the skills and, frankly, the inclination to start to get to grips with this new technology. People surprise us, of course. I think I tried to translate one of the slides that was up earlier about someone who was using a talking book player, and they were saying they've never pushed a button in their life. Well, I continue to volunteer for RNIB, and one of those roles is to visit people at their homes. And one of the people that I'm visiting regularly is someone who is nearing 70, never used a computer, and her main reason for her iPad is to read ebooks using VoiceOver. So for her, the drive, the will she has to read books, and it's working for her. So people do surprise us. Most of the books where this is working well are really text. They're really text-based books, not textbooks. And the experience is currently poor with more complex layouts. So where there's graphics, tables, maths, and so on. For large print, that experience can be okay because you've got the pinch to zoom and so on. So let's celebrate that. But where there is more complex layout, the solutions aren't there. The solutions lie in publishers adopting standards such as EPUB, which really help them understand how to encode those books so that they work well on a range of different devices for all users, including those with print impairments. And most of the ebooks which we can point to as being accessible are fairly recent titles. Publishers are rapidly digitizing what they call their backlists, but when I talked to someone whose interest was less about kind of regular consumer titles and more about research or older books, we came up quite short actually, that the titles that were published more than 10 years ago, they weren't available. So the advantages for more recent books, the popular, the consumer titles, the bestsellers, I suppose. Academic ebooks, and I noticed that many of you are from university setting, ebooks to you may mean something different to iBooks and Kobo and Kindle, because academic ebook platforms tend to use their own systems, and maybe what you get are a few pages as PDFs and those sorts of things. So in a sense, that's a different domain, and the solutions might be different. But some of the devices and some of the apps that I've shown you today actually might be able to play some of that content, and so that advantage comes. And also in ebook land, there really aren't any second-hand bargains. If I want to buy a print book, I can go to one of the online retailers, and often I can buy a second-hand version. Well, I don't know that that's possible with ebooks. It's not possible in any service that I've found. In fact, you're not even buying the book. You're buying a license to borrow it for a while, I think. And there are some lending systems, but none that I know of that have really taken off in the UK, at least. So for those, if we're asking people to effectively purchase every single book, it gets expensive quite quickly. So those that are used to more of a library model or a second-hand market would be disappointed with the current state of play. Although I saw in the bookseller, published based on a debate or a news release from a conference in London last week, Sweden apparently leads the way on ebook lending. Apparently, this is a nightmare in the UK. It's a very politically charged area, and I can understand why it is. But apparently, at least there is a glimmer of hope that within Sweden, there will be a model that means that ebook lending takes off here. So maybe that addresses that affordability issue. So some things for you to try out. And I do encourage you to go to the website and have a look at this presentation, and then I've given you some specific examples, because I've kind of said there's lots and lots of stuff out here. So here are my recommendations for you to try and get hold of, or ask people, if you have people, to evaluate them for you, or tell your consumers about. So I suggest you might look at things like the Kindle e-readers. There are inexpensive ones, and then there are ones like the Paperwhite, which give a very good contrast of black and white. So the Kindle e-readers, and they have a huge bookstore, but Kobo and Nook are better for side loading, which means that if you have a title that isn't locked down with a DRM, there's either a USB port in the side or something, and you can load your book in there and then use the device for that. Similarly, actually back to Kindle, there are services where with Kindle, every Kindle device has an email account, and you can take your own documents and email it to your Kindle, and it'll turn up in your library. So actually, if you've got content that isn't locked down, you still may use your Kindle e-reader, whether that's an app on a tablet or an e-reader device. You can use that to read your content, and you get the benefits of the large print, the Braille access, the note-taking, the highlighting, those sorts of things that are possible with Kindle. Moving on, if you're interested in large print with colour, there's the Kindle Fire and the Nook app, which I demonstrated with a video. And then for text-to-speech and for Braille, look at iBooks on the iPad and iPhone, Kindle on the iPad and iPhone, and the Kindle HD and HDX, which I don't know if they're available in Sweden. So maybe find a friendly person to do a review for you, or look out for reviews on YouTube. Coming towards the end, I started, of course, with the story of that dinner in the London house. And I don't say that in order to kind of cast Thomas Rhodes Armitage as old-fashioned and so on. We can imagine him there having dinner with a fire crackling in the grate and the clock ticking and the sound of horses outside. But actually, Thomas and his colleagues were the innovators of his day. He took the technology of his day, which was Braille, and used that to get so much more material accessible for people with sight loss. So if he were around today, I am convinced he would be grabbing this as an opportunity because he's an innovator and because he's saying, well, what can we do to take advantage of this? So lots more to be done, and here's my kind of thoughts on that, what I think Thomas would be thinking. He would be very clear that non-users still need services. This isn't the solution for everyone. This is not a solution for even those that want to use this technology and take advantage of it. It won't meet all of their needs. So non-users still need services. And people will mix specialist and mainstream solutions. I know this from the people I know who read using ebooks. They also use the specialist solutions too. But I think there is a real kind of onus on those of us in this community to help people to understand what their options are, and if they want to take them up, assist them with that. Now in the UK, we think that librarians maybe have a role in helping people take advantage of these things, and I wonder if that's something that library services might do in Sweden. And particularly given the very small number of titles available in Braille, I think the benefits are disproportionately high. So particularly pay attention to what this brings to Braille readers, especially those who are deaf-blind. But even with all of this wonderful stuff, there will be titles, and I could have shown you some, where they have content, so much of the book works, but there's important content in there that needs some work to make it more accessible to someone using speech or using Braille. So I think there's something for the transcription or the media agencies to think about whether they have a role in augmenting the mainstream publishing industry and helping them add accessibility on top of what they are able to do, because they won't be able to do everything. But for those same agencies to advocate for accessibility in mainstream publishing. The gentleman we had here earlier, I'm sure would love to talk to experts here and to consumers about what he could be doing to make sure the services he's producing, the books he's producing, work for people with print disabilities. And I noticed there were several exchanges during his talk. Less during mine. I think it must be the end of the day. And what we notice in the UK is, whilst we've always strived to get files from publishers, now they are targeting ebook platforms as part of their production workflows. The files they're able to give to specialist agencies are so much more ready to work with, to create large print, to create Braille from. It's beginning to make business sense. Well, it does make business sense for them to be using things like EPUB, because that's what the likes of the iBook store are demanding, and that benefits the alternate format producers, and it benefits a specialist library service, such as in a university, so that if they request something from a publisher, often they're not scratching their heads and trying to get something from a printer. They've actually got a digital file, and it's in good shape, is, fingers crossed, hand on wood, somewhere. Let me find some wood. Okay, I've done that. And then lastly, engaging with the standards. They won't be perfect. There are still things that no doubt need to be fixed. But it is the DAISY community that helped build EPUB. We heard that earlier. And it's the DAISY community that have taken all these years of knowledge about what makes good, accessible content that works for everyone. And that's been adopted and is being used now by the publishing industry. As we discover new challenges and new hurdles, let's make sure we continue to engage with the development of standards as they continue, so that accessibility is not just protected, but enhanced. and I think celebrate these amazing breakthroughs that I think are there. You know, many consumers are adopting these technologies and reading stuff and maybe even freeing up specialist services to concentrate on more complex content or with readers with more complex needs. But the fact that the mainstream is now delivering the same book at the same time, at the same price, at least for some books and for some readers, is something to celebrate before we move on and deal with the challenges that yet face us. So in closing, you'll be relieved to hear me say those words. My quotation for today is from an American, Thomas Friedman, and that is, big breakthroughs happen when what is suddenly possible meets what is desperately needed. Well, we know what is possible now with digital publishing, and we know very well what is desperately needed. I think this is a big breakthrough. Let's celebrate it, let's grab this opportunity, and let's make the most of it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Richard. It was very interesting, and I think we all have got a little more wiser how accessible ebooks are actually. I would like, unfortunately, we have no time for questions. But Richard will be around, so you can just ask him whatever you want. I would like to give you some chocolate and some Swedish.
I would like to receive some chocolate. That's great.
And also some Swedish licorice.
Wonderful. Oh, that's very, very generous. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
thank you
Richard.
for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking with you all. Thank you.